Since its establishment in 1983, the Daedu Food Company has been creating Korean food as well as producing foodstuffs and fully cooked food products using only the best ingredients and original recipes for an authentic and delicious taste.
We've been developing new ways to bring food to consumers since 2005, and now we're ready to introduce the next step in culinary excellence with a variety of rice flour products from Haessal Maroo.
Haessal Maroo is the perfect product in both taste and nutrition and can be used in all kinds of cooking, including confectionery, baking, rice cakes, and noodles.
Welcome to the world of Haessal Maroo, where the food doesn't just look great, it tastes great too. And it's all made with healthy and nutritious rice flour. The first place we're going to visit is the Haessal Maroo Bakery and Cake House.
Wow! Smell that delicious fresh-baked bread! Vegetable bread, cream puffs, pastries, and fresh-baked bread. If I stay here any longer, I'm going to give up my diet!
And you'll never guess what it's made of.
No idea! What is it?
All these breads are made of rice flour, not wheat flour.
You're kidding! Rice is for rice cakes!
I knew you wouldn't believe it. So, let's go take a look at the kitchen of this bakery.
There's only rice flour in the kitchen? Excuse me, Mr. Pastry Chef, where is all the wheat flour?
We at Haessal Maroo use rice flour instead of wheat flour. Daedu's food rice flour makes bread delicious and nutritious. There are 4 kinds of Haessal Maroo rice flour for making bread. The Gold Strong rice flour and Black Rice Gold Strong rice flour are good for making hard breads. The bread made of this flour stays fresh longer by using the age-preventing fermentation process. And they can be frozen without losing any flavor. Gold Power medium rice flour has 5 to 10% more hydration than wheat flour to keep its bread soft and moist longer, and to keep its shape longer. Soft rice flour is 100% rice, and it's uniform and consistent like wheat flour.
Wow! I didn't know there were so many kinds of rice flours. So what you're saying is, you can use rice flour to make bread just like wheat flour. Customers will enjoy the same great taste and quality of wheat bread with the same great taste but a better texture and that melt-in-your-mouth flavor, right?
Ding, ding, ding! That's right. If you make bread with rice flour, it stays fresh longer and keeps its chewy texture. So you can keep the bread longer without it getting hard and dried out. And if you make a cake with rice flour, it turns out soft and moist.
I knew that rice flour is more nutritious than wheat flour, but I had no idea it had so many benefits.
Exactly. Now let's make some bread using Haessal Maroo rice flour. We have to do something first before we can make the bread.
What's that?
We need to prepare the yeast which will be used to make the bread.
Ah.
Prepare the Hoshino yeast in a measuring cup. Then pour twice as much 30-degree water in another measuring cup. Then mix the yeast and water in a container that's been disinfected with alcohol.
Why does it have to be disinfected?
Because the Hoshino yeast is susceptible to germs.
Oh, I see.
Cover the water and yeast mix and write the date on the container.
Now we need to incubate it? Is that an incubator?
You are good. You need to set it at 30 degrees and let it sit for 24 hours. You can change the time depending on the incubator temperature. The incubated Hoshino yeast can be kept in a refrigerator at 4 degrees for about 2 weeks. But it's better to use it within a week's time.
Does it smell like raw rice wine?
Since Hoshino yeast is a naturally fermented yeast, temperature is very important. If the temperature goes over 30 degrees, microbes can form, which will hinder the fermentation process. So, to make the delicious bread, it is imperative that you keep the temperature constant. And don't forget to disinfect all the tools prior to making the Hoshino yeast. An automatic fermenter, a microbial fermentation incubator, or a dough conditioner can be used to cultivate the Hoshino natural yeast. Now it's time to make the bread.
First, we need to disinfect the tools with alcohol.
Ah, you remembered. After you finish disinfecting the tools, you'll need to prepare the ingredients for making bread. The main ingredient is not wheat flour.
It's Gold Strong rice flour.
That's right. First, put all the ingredients together, except the butter, in a vertical mixer and mix for 1 minute at low speed. Then mix for 1 more minute at medium speed. Then spread out the dough on an iron plate and cover it with plastic wrap. Then put the dough on a conditioner and ferment it for 12 hours. You'll need to set the temperature at 20 degrees with 70% humidity.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ding! It's been 12 hours.
Put the dough in a mixing bowl and mix it for 1 minute at low speed, then for 3 more minutes at medium speed.
Now it's time to add the butter.
Right. Add the butter and mix for 1 minute at low speed, then 4 more minutes at medium speed.
Mr. Pastry Chef, is there anything else we need to worry about?
Temperature is very important when you finish mixing the dough for the second time. To keep the dough's volume and elasticity, it's important to keep the appropriate temperature, 22 degrees in summer and 24 degrees in winter. Adding the butter later decreases the time to make the dough, and it makes it more glutinous, which makes the dough stronger and keeps it fresh longer. After the dough is done, cut it into 280-gram portions. Then roll the dough into balls to make sure the surface is smooth and to stimulate the relaxed gluten texture. and to increase the dough's tensile strength, making it more elastic. Next, roll the balls to spread and relax the gluten.
Why do you need to roll and fold the dough over and over again?
It makes it easier to mold the dough, but you need to be careful about molding it too. When you reshape the dough, don't be too rough. If you roll the dough too hard, it will tear, and that can affect the final product. After you spread the dough, you will need to fold it firmly 3 times. Then put the dough into a form and pack it well. That will make the final product expand. Then let the dough rise a second time.
Wow, making bread takes a lot of work.
Making good food is hard work. Now, let the dough rise for 100 minutes. Fermentation conditions will change depending on the season. 30 degrees for 85% humidity in the summer, and 35 degrees with 85% humidity in the winter. Finally, it's time to bake the bread. Use a convection oven and bake the dough at 175 degrees Celsius for 45 minutes.
Wow, the dough is getting puffy!
And now we have yeast bread made with gold strong rice flour. Since rice flour bread has more moisture, it needs to be baked in a convection oven.
This is so delicious! I can't believe this bread is made of rice flour.
Pour 2 kilograms of water in a mixing bowl with sugar and salt and bring to a boil. Then, add strong rice flour to make the dough viscous. Temperature is very important.
Why?
We need to keep the temperature over 80 degrees because anything lower will make the dough viscous and the bread will lose its freshness faster. When you're done making the dough, let it cool. Then let it rise for 12 hours at room temperature. Now we'll make the dough foundation. Put all the ingredients, except the butter, into a vertical mixer and mix it for 1 minute at low speed, then for 3 minutes at medium speed.
Are we going to add the butter later, like we did before?
Yes, for the same reason as before too. After mixing, add the butter and mix for 1 minute at low speed, then 4 minutes at medium speed. Keep an eye on the temperature of the dough. Next, cut the dough into 50-gram portions with your hands. You'll need to be careful here when you make sweetbreads. After you cut the dough, It's very important that you put the dough itself into a refrigerator to prevent fermenting. Now, at this time, you can do other things to help prepare the bread, because even though wheat flour bread needs lots of fermentation, rice flour bread will not be as good if the dough becomes fermented.
Now we need to make the filling, sweet bean paste.
You love bread, don't you? Fill the dough with mixed whole red bean paste and mashed red bean paste in a 1-to-1 ratio, because it will make the bread taste better.
Then are we going to bake it?
No. Now we need to ferment it for a second time at 35 degrees with 85% humidity for 60 minutes. Then, bake the dough in a deck oven with the overhead flame set at 200 degrees Celsius and the underside flame set at 175 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. We finally have the red bean paste bread, which is made of gold strong rice flour. Don't they look good?
Red bean paste is sweet and rice flour is healthy, so it makes the perfect meal.
Did I mention that rice bread is very moist? Just remember, you have to bake it for 10% longer.
Okay. Before we go to the next recipe, I want to ask about the mixers. Are there two kinds of mixers?
Yes. This is a vertical mixer, and this is a spiral mixer.
But you've been using the vertical mixer all this time. When do you use the spiral mixer?
All mixers are used to make the dough more glutinous. They condense and expand the dough over and over again to make it more elastic.
What's the difference between the two mixers?
A vertical mixer has only one beater, while a spiral mixer has two.
Then the spiral mixer can make the dough faster?
That's right. It decreases the time by 20%. A vertical mixer can be used for a variety of ingredients, including making doughs for baking, whipping, and cakes. But a spiral mixer can only be used for making baking dough. In addition, a vertical mixer can mix 2 to 11 kilograms of dough, but a spiral mixer can mix 11 to 20 kilograms of dough.
Then a spiral mixer can be used for a lot of dough. Mr. Pastry Chef, is there anything else we need to know about when using them?
When you have the same amount of dough, using a spiral mixer is a lot faster than a vertical mixer, because the vertical mixer circles vertically, but a spiral mixer circles the container and the beater at the same time, which decreases time.
All this bread is making me hungry. Last time we boiled the dough before making the bread. What is the sponge dough method?
The sponge dough method refers to making the dough twice. Making the dough twice allows for a more durable fermentation and decreases the time it takes for it to ferment for a second time. In addition, the final product stays fresh longer with a softer texture. There are 4 standards for sponge dough, depending on fermentation time. 2 hours for the flying sponge, 4 hours for the standard sponge, 8 hours for the extended sponge, and 12 to 24 hours for the overnight method. If you go by fermentation temperature, there are 2 standards, the average temperature sponge method and the low temperature sponge method.
Ah, I see.
Now it's time to make the bread. We're going to use a vertical mixer again. First, mix the ingredients for 1 minute at low speed and for 3 minutes at medium speed. You'll need to set the temperature at 24 degrees Celsius for the dough.
Why?
Because after making the dough, you'll need to ferment it at 27 degrees with 75% humidity for 2 to 4 hours. But since it's sponge dough, the temperature of the dough will increase 1 degree per hour. When the dough expands to 4 times its size, or when the center of the dough contracts, the sponge dough is ready.
Then we remake the dough again?
Exactly. Add the sponge dough to the second dough mix in a mixer. Then, mix for 1 minute at low speed and for 2 minutes at medium speed. Finally, mix in the butter for 1 minute at low speed and for 3 minutes at medium speed.
Adding the butter later will decrease the time it takes to make the dough, and it makes it more glutinous, which makes the dough stronger and keeps it fresh longer, right?
Now you've got it! When you're done making the dough, the surface should be very soft. That means gluten should be inside the dough, making it nice, stretchy, and elastic. If the dough has good elasticity, it will stick together and make a beating sound in the vertical mixer. That's how you know when the dough is ready. Then you remove the dough from the mixer and separate it into portions. Then you mold the dough.
Make them look pretty. Good looks taste great too.
Okay, I will. When you finish molding the dough, ferment it for a second time at 35 degrees Celsius with 85% humidity for 40 minutes.
The fermentation time got shorter.
Yeah, the sponge dough method is a good way to ferment the dough so it makes the second fermentation period shorter. Now, bake the dough in a deck oven for 15 minutes, and it's done. Delicious-looking sausage bread is completed.
We baked it for 10% longer because rice bread is moist, right?
That's right. Now you're a rice bread master. Next, we are going to make chiffon cake.
Women love soft chiffon cake.
First, prepare the ingredients. Mix eggs, sugar, and salt with a whisk. Next, sift together weak rice flour and baking powder. Do you know why?
Yeah, I know why. This is to prevent powder from clumping and to get rid of any foreign matter. Plus, it makes the flour soft and airy.
Wow, you are good. Now, be careful when you mix them with a whisk so that the mixture doesn't clump. Next, mix in cooking oil and vanilla oil. Now it's time to make the meringue. First, wipe the mixing bowl clean. Because if there's any leftover shortening or butter, it's difficult to make the meringue. Then, add sugar incrementally into the egg whites. You'll need to make sure the sugar melts completely into the egg whites for a perfect meringue. You'll want to whip the meringue to about 80% hardness, because if you make it 100% meringue, it will be too hard and it will not set properly. A chiffon cake's ideal gravity is 0.4 to 0.5. It's important to mix your meringue well when making a chiffon cake, because if you add an insufficient meringue into the dough, the meringue will form a mass and ruin the final product. And if you mix the meringue too much, the meringue will collapse, making the dough too watery, and the final product will not expand.
Is it time to mix the dough and the meringue?
Yes. And you'll need to mix them 10% longer than when you make a wheat flour chiffon cake.
Why?
Well, there's a lot of differences between rice flour and wheat flour. The biggest difference is that you need to mix the rice flour longer to get all the air that's inside the dough out. Since rice flour is softer than wheat flour, if you mix rice flour like wheat flour, you tend to get a shrunken final product. That's why it's important that you mix the rice flour about 10% longer than you would wheat flour. Now, put the dough into a chiffon mold and bake it in a deck oven with the overhead flame set at 180 degrees Celsius and the underside flame set at 160 degrees Celsius for 40 minutes. Then the chiffon cake is done. Next, we'll make buttering cookies with rice flour. When we use gold medium rice flour, making cookies is no problem. Soften the butter in shortening and add sugar incrementally.
Is that so the sugar melts?
That's right. Now add the eggs incrementally until the mix is smooth and creamy. When you add the eggs, make sure you mix them well so they don't separate. Milk fat, or otherwise known as butter fat, and water do not mix very well, and they tend to separate. Eggs are like water, so to prevent separation, add the eggs in increments very slowly and mix them well. Or you can add some egg yolks because they contain a thing called lecithin. It's an emulsifier, and that will help make the dough mix really well. When separation occurs, you can add about 10 to 20% of the egg yolk back into the rice flour, because rice flour will absorb the water, and that helps prevent separation. Once the sugar has completely melted, is soft, and the cream has an ivory color, it's done. Next, sift the gold medium rice flour and mix well.
Do we sift for the same reason we sift the chiffon?
Yes, it's to make the cookies soft. Add a little bit of salt too, because the salt improves the taste and flavor of the other ingredients. Now it's time to mold the cookies. Prepare an iron plate with silicone paper for easy cookie removal. Then form the cookies with a pastry bag. Then bake the cookies in a convection oven for 12 minutes or in a deck oven for 15 minutes. Now you have delicious butter ring cookies made of gold medium rice flour.
Wow, you really can make cookies with rice flour.
Rice flour is easier to digest than wheat flour, and it makes you feel full, so it complements any meal. Rice flour is chewier than bread made from wheat flour as well. All these delicious-looking breads, including yakimochi, kichal bread, and chewy sweet donuts, can all be made with rice flour.
All you need to do is to prepare the frozen rice dough.
It's very important to know how to defrost the dough properly. Defrosting times depend on the season. 20 minutes at room temperature for yakimochi in the summer and 40 minutes in the winter. 15 minutes at room temperature for glutinous sticks in the summer and 30 minutes in the winter. Defrost kechal bread, glutinous donuts, rice balls, and baked donuts for 30 minutes at room temperature in the summer and for 60 minutes in the winter. It's important to cover the frozen dough with plastic wrap when you're defrosting, so that the dough does not dry out. Defrosting times will differ depending on the season or the temperature of your location, and this is very, very important. Once you defrost them, they cannot be refrozen.
When the frozen rice dough is defrosted properly, it can be baked or fried as it is. When making yakimochi, place the dough on an iron plate and add a pinch of black sesame seeds. Cover the dough with 2 pieces of silicone paper to prevent it from drying out. Next, bake the dough in a convection oven at 160 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes or in a deck oven with the overhead flame set at 200 degrees Celsius and the underside flame set at 185 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes.
When you make kechal bread, first spray the dough with water. Then bake in a convection oven at 165 degrees Celsius for 40 minutes. or in a deck oven with the overhead flame set at 185 degrees Celsius and the underside flame set at 160 degrees Celsius for 50 minutes. Baking temperatures and times depend on the amount of dough you're baking, but you need to bake them enough to avoid center shrinkage.
Next, we will learn how to fry frozen rice dough. First, you need to fry glutinous donuts and rice balls in 180 degrees Celsius oil for roughly 8 minutes, while glutinous sticks should be fried for roughly 7 minutes.
When you're defrosting, you should defrost the rice balls perfectly before frying them. But don't completely defrost the glutinous sticks, because if you do, they'll become squished after you try to fry them. I would try and fry them when they are defrosted about 30%.
As Mr. Pastry Chef said, making donuts is not easy. Even when I follow the recipe perfectly, the final product doesn't always come out. Why is that?
Let me explain it to you. First, a donut can absorb too much oil. This happens when a donut has too much sugar, butterfat, or expanding agent, resulting in larger pores and holes in the donut surface, and ultimately too much oil in the donut. Second, if a donut is too small, meaning the ratio of dough mixture to the dough making process is incorrect, other reasons for inferior donuts are not enough chemical expansion agent, insufficient frying time, or refrozen defrosted dough.
What about if the donut shrinks?
In that case, it could be the dough making process went wrong, or the frying time is too short, or it might have been defrosted too much. And the last error is a donut with air bubbles. That means the ratio of dough mixture to the dough making process was incorrect, or that there was water on the surface of the dough when it was defrosted.
Thanks to you, I can make perfect donuts now.
For almost 30 years, the Daedu Food Company has been working hard to produce a variety of rice products, encouraging a healthy lifestyle through rice.
We will continue to develop new and exciting rice products well into the future. Expect a world full of abundant food options from Haessal Maroo in the future.